challenge with both the modern and scientific understanding and the wisdom that comes from the Hindu practices as well. And so through this session, we'll look into why our attention is under constant demand, how these distractions actually affect our mind's well-being, and most importantly, some practical techniques you can actually take home to help cultivate more stronger clarity within you, concentration, and inner balance. Whether you're a student, a professional, parent, or someone just trying to get your focus back under your own control, we hope you'll leave today's webinar with some valuable insights and practical tools that you can actually carry with you day to day. So thanks again for being here. We highly encourage you to stay engaged, participate in discussions, part of the Q&A, and everything else. So before we begin, we'll start with a short prayer. Nityanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dvandvatitam Gagana Sadusham Tattvamasyadilaksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshibhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Satkurum Tam Namami. And so before we begin, here's a quick overview of what we'll be going through over the course of this seminar. So first, we'll be going over the actual problem of declining attention, its causes and effects. After that, we'll be going through the actual science behind how attention is born, how attention comes about, and how attention is retained. From there, we'll have a short workshop, a small session to actually go over some practical methods to tackle this thing of attention, your attention span, being able to reclaim your attention. And then finally, time permitting, we'll also be having our guest speaker along with a short discussion and a Q&A. And so the first thing we want to ask is there actually an attention problem? Like what's the issue here? So here's some statistics of the past 5 generations, starting from the baby boomers, which we'll use as our baseline to compare to. And the stats here, they're all used to kind of compare to see if every generation is actually having the attention problem, or is it only the new generations? So as you can see through the slide, so baby boomers, obviously the technology that's coming in, it's a little bit more, I would say the learning curve is a little bit higher than for people who are born more recently. So they're offline most of the time. But as you can see, the closer and closer you get to today's age, that offline time, so the time off screen is obviously lower and lower, meaning we're spending more and more time on our phones. Same thing for multitasking rate because we're doing so many things at a time. And then a similar kind of interesting pattern we're seeing here for the average screen time where it starts to increase, but once we reach the Gen Alpha, it actually comes back down, which is a little bit interesting to me. And so what's the actual issue we're facing here? What are the implications that we're looking at based on what we're seeing now? So first, let's take a look at some of the causes for the recent changes in attention span. One, so interruptions due to notifications on social media, entertainment, things like that. Because to be honest, sometimes it's hard to focus when there's so many distractions present, whether it's YouTube notification, WhatsApp notification, Facebook notification, Twitter, Instagram, you name it, right? There's always something kind of blowing up on your phone. So always something kind of is there to pull you away from whatever you're currently doing. The other side of it is there's also a fragmentation that starts to happen when you're constantly switching between tasks, using multiple screens, especially now, so a lot of us maybe will have multiple screens, whether for work or for gaming or for whatever it is, multiple screens plus your phones, plus maybe iPad and whatever else you have. And a lot of it actually kind of relates to a seeking for instant gratification, whether it's you're making social media posts looking for the likes, or you're actually going through the social media posts and looking for something that makes you feel a certain way, things like this. And then there's also the aspect of the information overload, which is literally we're swallowing information so much per second. And a lot of the time it is a little bit of an almost overstimulation where we're basically doom scrolling for hours and hours and hours, constantly retaining information, whether good or bad, but constantly basically eating what we're seeing in front of us. And so before we continue, let's play a little quick game. So I want to interact with you guys for a little bit. So put, let's say you have 10 fingers, right? I'm gonna play a game where you put a finger down if you basically if one of these things relates to you or if one of these things actually apply to what you're doing. I'll also play with you guys. So starting with 10. So put a finger down if you pick up your phone to do one thing and 20 minutes later you forgot why you picked it up. Put a finger down if you read the same text message multiple times because literally nothing sank in. Put a finger down if somebody's talking to you and then you realize midway through that you haven't been listening to a word that they were saying. Put a finger down if someone's we just did that. Put a finger down if you walk into a room and immediately forgot what you came for. That's, yeah, definitely me. Put a finger down if you're watching something but barely remember what you saw. Yeah, definitely. Put a finger down if you try to sleep early, but you end up doom scrolling for hours and you end up basically sleeping at 2, 3, or however long it is. 100%. Put a finger down if a single notification pulls you away from what you're doing and it's difficult to get back into the task that you were doing initially. Put a finger down if your mind keeps jumping to your to-do list even when you're trying to relax. Put a finger down if you're trying to learn something new, but quickly feel the urge to check something else. Put a finger down if the day feels incredibly busy, but by the end of it, you're left wondering, what did I even do today? What happened basically? So just to get an idea, like how many fingers did you put down? I feel like a lot of us would have put down, honestly, probably most of our fingers. One finger. Oh, nice. And so the next question is, why does attention matter? What's the purpose of our attention? Why does it matter where our attention goes to? So let's look at what attention actually influences. So number one is your learning capacity, your learning power. It's a little bit harder to remember and actually internalize what you learned when your attention span is kind of going all over the place. That attention energy is basically it affects your capacity to learn and retain information. Another part of it is your relationships. It affects you because you become less attentive to the people you're spending time with. You need the constant stimulation, the constant kind of, yeah, literally the constant stimulation, and it causes people inadvertently to start basically ignoring them and their feelings, and everything becomes um, the mind becomes very fast-paced, and you forget the things that are right in front of you. And your productivity. This one I think is a given, but it becomes harder to focus on a task and get into the actual flow state. And it becomes more difficult to finish the task that you start, and you end up honestly just making more errors. And so, another question for the audience now. So, how many times do you actually think you check your phone a day? So, let's get a number out there. So, think about the times that you're looking at a notification. Sometimes suddenly you get a notification, and so you do a quick glance to your phone. Think about the times where you're checking your messages, checking to see whether you're actively using your phone, whether you're actually watching on YouTube, or whether you're searching something on Google or whatever it is. Like all the different times that you're actually looking at your phone. It could be maybe 10 times a day, maybe 25 times a day. That sounds maybe reasonable. But if you think about all this, it actually goes a little bit higher. So give it a few seconds to actually think about it. Even for me, I'm thinking about it. And to be honest, if I think about all the times that I'm either glancing at my phone to check messages, notifications, I see my screen suddenly pop up because, something happens, whatever it is, you kind of start to realize the number grows really fast. And so, an interesting stat in 2003, they actually did a poll to see how many people or how often people were actually looking at their phones. and it was over 100 times. So this is from 2003. The average person checked their phone 144 times per day. And think about 2003 till now. A lot of time things have happened, especially tech from the tech side of things, in those 3 years. So on average, we can say safely that the notification numbers has definitely gone up. I only check a notification when I get a notification. To be honest, Basil, that's probably the safest thing to do. The whole thing that we're trying to say here is we want to be able to have the good practices with technology so we don't deplete our attention span. So having these certain practices where we only look at a certain times or we only use our phone for specific purposes, all these things actually help bring back our attention span, which is something we'll get into further in the session too. But that's definitely good on you, man. So next, what does neuroscience actually say about this thing of attention span? What is attention? What is that energy of attention? So what does the brain do? To get an idea of what the brain actually does, basically every moment of the day, the brain is always receiving information from the different senses. Whether we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, all these different things are basically different inputs for the brain, different inputs for this system. And it's not just receiving those inputs, it's not just receiving the smells, the taste, the touch, the sights, and everything. It's also digesting them, it's processing it, it's putting it through basically the processing of our thoughts, emotions, memories, our own personal biases, our signals from the bodies. Like, for example, if we're hungry or tired or in pain, all of these things basically get digested through whatever visual or auditory or whatever stimulus we're getting from the outside world. And the amount of information our brain receives is honestly a lot. If we consciously paid attention to everything that came into our body, we'd be pretty overwhelmed pretty quickly. And so the brain has actually a really good filtering system where it actually decides what information is important enough to bring awareness to. What's the actual, like, what needs your attention right now and what can be ignored and be put off for later. And this filtering process is what allows you to focus on a conversation, allows you to focus on a book, allows you to finish a task without being distracted. You're basically, your brain is always prioritizing what it needs to do and how long it needs to do. That's a thing called attention and attention span. And in other words, attention is not just about concentrating, it's your brain choosing and prioritizing what deserves your awareness at that moment. And we'll see through the next few slides that a lot of modern technologies are specifically designed to compete for that limited attention, especially when we look at marketing. The whole thing is to compete for your attention, the things that basically to compete for space in your memory, the things that you'll remember. And so a little bit more about the brain here is the part that's really has a lot to do with this thing of the attention filter, the attention span is the prefrontal cortex. So this area of the brain right here, it's right behind your forehead, and it's a lot of people call it as the brain's basically executive control center because that's where a lot of the higher level functions for a day-to-day life happens. Things like focusing your attention, making decisions, planning ahead, solving problems, managing multiple tasks, controlling impulses. The more, the always a lot of the conscious things that we're doing that we're intentionally doing. It's kind of like the brain CEO, where whatever happens, that makes its final decision in a way. It's constantly just deciding what deserves your attention, what can wait, what you should do next. But the challenge here is every time we get distracted, whether it's a notification, a text message, or even we get bored and we want to start scrolling through social media, it's our prefrontal cortex that has to stop what it's doing, shift its attention to whatever you're deciding to do, and then basically eventually come back to the original task. So this part of the brain right here is the one that's basically steering the wheel saying, okay, we have to do this now, we'll do this. We have to do this now, we'll do this. We have to do this now, we'll do this. And so this is the one that's always kind of driving the wheel, so to speak. And so another kind of really interesting part of the brain is this thing called neuroplasticity. I'm introducing a lot of things right now, and we're going to be piecing everything together. But neuroplasticity is the brain's its ability to change. It's the ability to change, adapt, and reorganize itself throughout our lives. So every time we learn something new, every time we repeat a behavior, time we practice a certain kind of skill, all these different things that we're kind of ingraining into ourselves, it builds a connection between our brain cells, and that current becomes stronger. So in another way, basically the brain gets better whatever we keep doing. Whatever we do, we get better at it. A really good example of this is muscle memory. So learning how to drive a car, a bicycle, playing an instrument, even in sports too. The more you play a sport, the better you get at it. Especially with the FIFA going on right now too, you'll see some of these guys are crazy with the way they're able to handle the ball, shoot the scores. It's because every day they're practicing and actually putting that muscle memory into it. The body and brain start to function in a way where it's basically second nature. And after enough repetition, these actions become automatic. And exactly, addiction is an extremely strong example of neuroplasticity too, because it's both the good and the bad. The brain doesn't differentiate. The brain doesn't there's no morality in the brain. Whatever you do, it's going to keep getting better at it, whether it's good or bad for you. If you're going to practice, for example, certain bad habits, you're going to keep doing that because the brain becomes more accustomed to it. It knows how to basically it builds itself around it. It literally forms in a way where it becomes more apt to whatever it is that you're doing. It's rewiring itself to perform those tasks more efficiently, whether it's making yourself, strong in sports, whether you're studying or whether you're drinking and smoking, whatever it is, it's rewiring itself to become more and more apt to do those things. So it's definitely something that you want to be very conscious of and very careful of. And so the next important thing, it's exactly what you're saying here, is the brain doesn't differentiate between good and bad habits. It just strengthens whatever you do already and whatever you do repeatedly. So whether it's for meditation, reading, focus, your brain becomes better at concentrating. But if you become very habituated to constantly checking your phone, doom scrolling, responding to every notification, switching between apps, the brain also adapts to that too, and it becomes accustomed to that. It becomes basically literally built for that. And so over time, the brain starts to expect these certain novelty, and especially when it comes to social media and like basically the world in your hand, it becomes accustomed to these instant gratifications. It becomes accustomed to frequent interruptions, rapid task switching, instead of being able to focus on one thing for a deep and sustained period of time. That's why a lot of people, especially nowadays, are finding it more and more difficult to actually sit through a lecture or read a book or even just do one thing at a time without having to reach for their phone every 5 minutes. And it's not necessarily because they've lost the ability to focus, it's just because of how often we're doing these things. The brain has already started to adapt to always be on the phone, to always be kind of switching from one thing into another and not be able to focus on one thing single pointedly. We're basically training our mind or training our brain to be a certain way. So the good thing about neuroplasticity is it works both ways, to be honest. If you're doing one thing and you don't like it, you can change it back. Basically the same ability that allows us to build distracting habits also allows us to build better ones. By constantly practicing, consistently practicing these techniques that strengthen our attention, we actually retrain our brains to focus, concentrate, and remain present again. Like we're always rewiring our brain. It's just a matter of whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously. So adding a little bit more to this is this thing of task switching or multitasking. One thing that, to be honest, a lot of us don't really realize or don't really fully understand is the idea of, oh, I'm doing multiple things at the same time is actually not completely true. the way that our brains work, the way that we work, and even, for example, the way the computers work, we're actually always doing one thing at a time. We're just switching between them really fast. That's the essence of what's going on. Like when we're multitasking, like for example, if we're watching a video on one side, or we're like doing some work on another side, we're hearing a podcast on another side. It's basically what's going on. The brain is literally switching from each of these three so fast that it feels like we're doing a lot at once. But to be honest, we're just kind of doing monkey mind from one thing to another, to another, to another, to another, to another. The brain, we're basically, it's the same thing that we talked about in the last slide, this neuroplasticity thing. We're just training ourselves to keep switching tasks rather than focusing on one thing at a time. Like our human brain is not designed to focus, or sorry, the human brain is designed to focus attention on one thing at a time, but the question is, how often are we switching between these tasks? This is what's called task switching. Every time we switch, our brain has to actually spend energy to reorient itself and to remember where we left off, bringing the information that we need for that specific thing and rebuild our focus. So let's say again, for example, the thing of doing work on one computer, listening to a podcast, watching a movie at the same time. Every time we switch between the three, the brain is doing all this at a time. Like it keeps reorienting itself, trying to figure out, okay, where did I leave off? Bring back the information it needs, rebuild the focus, do the next, repeat the cycle, do the next, repeat the cycle, even though it feels instantaneous. And it happens so quick. It feels like we're doing multiple things at once. But to be honest, every time we do this, we're spending so much more energy rather than if we were just doing one thing at a time. So, despite all this, basically, now the question is, why do we still lose attention? Honestly, it's boredom. We get bored. When we're bored, we want to do something else. Why are we bored? Boredom is basically defined as the state of being weary and restless through the lack of interest. So it's a little bit of a subtlety, but boredom is actually a choice. You always have countless things that you can do and still be bored. It's the loss of attention that causes boredom. Being attentive to whatever's present in front of you, that actually removes the boredom because you become involved in what you're doing. Your energy gets put into everything that you're doing. It no longer becomes something that you don't want to do because you're doing it and you actually you're in it in a way. So really, it's thinking of the past or future. Basically, doing something other than what you're doing in front of you is what makes your attention stray. Being present in what you're doing is what kills boredom and actually makes you more attentive. Boredom causes attention deficit. It's a very definitely boredom, I would say, is not the direct cause, but it's one of the biggest influences to it. I would say almost, yeah, probably cause, because from boredom is where we start going from one app to another, doing one thing to another, switching between one thing to another. We get into that pattern of basically always hopping between tasks. So in a way, I would say yes, Basil. Another way that we can talk about boredom is it can be defined as the absence of attention from where you are. Like you're doing one thing, but your mind is somewhere else. You're thinking about a million other things rather than the thing in front of you. But the thing in front of you isn't actually either getting your attention or getting finished. So another part of this is also overthinking, because when you start overthinking, you start trapping yourself in a mental loop, constantly thinking about something that doesn't let your mind rest, or you just don't even let go of the thought. You run into anxiety and rumination. It becomes very heavy in your mind. And so another thing that we really need to focus on is being able to learn how to be stable with your thoughts and learning how to let go of your thoughts so they don't have to literally fog up your mind. And so another next question here is how do we, okay, so we know all this now about the neuroplasticity of the brain. We know about the prefrontal cortex being kind of the driver, all these different things about the boredom, attention span, and everything else. So the question is now, how do we sustain our attention? How do we fix the issue? So again, just to go through everything that we're talking about here. So neuroscience basically tells us what the brain processes, how the brain processes, and it tells us that attention is trainable. We train it to be less attentive in a way. We can train it to be more attentive. Are we multitasking because we're bored? 100%. It literally is because we don't want to do the thing in front of us, we go to the next thing. So, for example, back to the example of doing some work while you have while you're watching a movie and having a podcast here. You don't actually want to do the work, so you're watching a movie. You don't actually care about the movie, so you're also having a podcast. You don't care about the podcast and you want to feel productive, so you're doing work, but you don't want to do any of these, but you're still doing all three at a time. So back to here, what neuroscience is telling us is what the brain processes, how the brain processes, and that attention is trainable. A couple of things that neuroscience is still exploring is the relationship between the consciousness and the brain. How does this sense of I arise? Where does that feeling of I, how is it born? And why does the brain process an inner experience, basically? And so we'll spend the next few minutes talking about where ancient Hinduism meets modern science. So the Vedic studies, it studies the consciousness from the inside out, starting from consciousness. Neuroscience studies the brain from the outside in to reach consciousness. Vedic sciences go the opposite way, where it starts from consciousness going out. They both study basically what goes on in the brain and how it relates to consciousness, but from different perspectives, from different lenses. And so from that, there's different revelations, different experiences that come forth. And so if we compare the two between neuroscience and Vedic science, the neuroscience basically studies the brain, while Vedic studies through the consciousness through experience, the individual experience from the inside out. In a way, they both use the scientific method where we start with a question, we do the inner and outer research, we form a hypothesis, do some experimenting with it, see what comes out of the experiment, and most importantly, between the two is making sure that whatever experiment we do, it's reproducible in others who also want to do it. So, for example, in neuroscience, I mean, obviously there's the experiments, like we know what the experiments are. In Vedic science, this is what's known as things like samyamas or practicing powerful cognitions and things like that. The whole thing is basically you have a hypothesis, you practice, you do the experiments, you look at the outcome of the experience, your individual experience, and then basically you transform from that, which is what the next part is. Neuroscience looks at things from the third person perspective. Vedic science looks at things from the first person's perspective. So these two perspectives make a big difference. Neuroscience explains the mechanisms of the brain, while Vedic science cultivates the transformation from the inside out. Neuroscience asks, how does attention work? Vedic sciences asks, how can attention be mastered? It's basically the idea of mastery over the human body and mind and reclaiming your human body and mind as yours. And so, a quick introduction to our guru, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Sri Nityananda Paramashiva. So, there was a brain study done a couple of years back in 2004 by Integris Mental Health over in Ohio. And so, in this study, basically, the doctor, you can see him in the black suit there. Um, they did a study on the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, asking him to enter the state of meditation so that they can record his brainwaves. And so what they found is as the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was entering into meditation, the brain activity had a 90% reduction in the metabolic activity. And actually, an interesting thing that I want to share here too is they also noted the lighting of the medial prefrontal cortex. So literally this region we were talking about earlier in the slide deck with the prefrontal cortex being the driver of the mind. And in Hinduism, we call this as the third eye region. And the doctor also described how, actually, to be honest, usually in normal brain scans, the jumping between different kinds of waves is a little bit jagged. It's very jumpy, very stuttered, I want to say. But in this case, what the doctor actually noted is the brainwaves are fluidly switching between one another. It was very smooth. It was very, yeah, literally smooth. The QEEG also showed that there was literally voluntary control over delta, theta, alpha, beta transitions, where normally all these things happen more coincidentally or due to external stimulus. Here, we were seeing that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was able to intentionally and voluntarily control and switch between these brainwaves. And so if you literally YouTube Nityananda, the meditation research, you'll be able to find the video where the scientist in the background, he's actually speaking a lecture, talking about his findings. And during the spot where when they saw the lighting of the prefrontal cortex, the doctor asked what happened during that transition, during the fluid transition of basically these states. And the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism simply stated that he was opening his third eye. And so these are the things that definitely more research needs to be done. And if you're familiar with the brain activity studies, like you know that these results are rarely documented. So having something like this on paper, on video, the lecture is there, the actual documentation is there, everything's there. It's a very rare case and a very unique case, which we're very lucky to have. And yes, exactly. So exactly, they usually happen independently of each other, but in this case, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was able to smoothly transition voluntarily and intentionally between all these different states. And so some more studies. So right now there's the ongoing Paramashivoham program, a 21 days guided program by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism. And a study was done during this program where every day they did yoga, they did meditation. In Vedic sciences, there's something called darshan, which is being seen by God. And also all the participants went through a full vegetarian diet as well. And so the results after these 21 days is basically 40 to 50% of them showed an increase in mitochondrial activity, the changes in gene expression of 585 genes. So literally the genomes itself start to excuse me, alter and shape in a certain way. 100% rise in vitamin D levels, cholesterol normalization in 85% of the participants, blood glucose returning to normal ranges in diabetic participants. Hemoglobin levels were also reported to increase up to 70%. And these bodily changes are really honestly unprecedented, especially over like 21 days, being able to have these stats, being able to show and prove that, you know, the body is receiving basically, the body is receptive to these changes. This thing of neuroplasticity, it does work, and we're able to visibly see that it works because these 21 days, it's nothing but the neuroplasticity. We're retraining the grooves of our mind to be a certain way, to install certain habits into our body and mind, and this is the outcome. There have been many yoga studies, but none have done authentic practices such as this one, I would say. And so another thing with attention in the aspect of yoga. So in the next slide, we'll go through a short clip where the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism talks more about this. But there's the 8 limbs of yoga. There's yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. And so you can see on the slide here what each of them roughly means. But one thing that's actually very interesting about this is the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism also says that these are the 8 limbs of yoga, meaning it's not one after the other like we might logically think. It's actually all these things are happening at the same time. So, for example, while we're sitting or in asana, where our body is stable and comfortable, we're also at the same time doing dharana, where we're binding our mind to a single point. Also, at the same time, we're turning our attention inwards away from external stimuli. In the same time, we're also relating to the world without creating suffering, meaning without having resistance. All these things are happening at the same time when we're looking at the thing of yoga. And so we'll go to the next slide where the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism talks a little bit more about this.
understanding. Nirvijasya, I'll try to give
Hopefully you can hear.
my own understanding, my own experience on this truth. Till last sutra, Patanjali was explaining how yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, these 8 are deeper than the earlier ones. Yama is understanding about the law and the power which executes the law. Niyama is raising the coherence of your consciousness to the cosmic consciousness. Asana, aligning and preparing your body for the cosmic experience. Pranayama, aligning and elevating the life energy in your system through the proper life breath process. Pratyahara, withdrawing from the things which distracts you from the cosmic experience. Dharana, centering on the great truths which leads you to the cosmic experience. Dhyana, merging or becoming one with that cosmic experience. Samadhi, completely experiencing the non-return zone, the space where you do not get separated or you do not come back. Patanjali was explaining in all the sutras how every step is deeper than the previous one. As I was telling yesterday, the difference between pratyahara and dharana is not just quantity, it is qualitative. Please understand. Do not think if you do 2 hours of pratyahara, it can lead to dharana by itself. No. Pratyahara and dharana are not just quantitatively different, they are qualitatively different. So the quality which you need to add for you to move from pratyahara to dharana is what I call sacred secrets. As I said yesterday, from pratyahara, for you to move to dharana, the honesty to the identity which you believe as you. Please understand, whatever you believe as you, whatever position you hold in your social life, family life, personal life, spiritual life, whatever position you take up, whatever commitment you accept, be honest to it. If you are not able to be honest to all the identities you are committing, at least prioritize and drop the identities which you are not able to fulfill. Do not accept. Understand? Very beautifully Ramakrishna says in his life, in his teachings, life is an account. Always be ready when Yama calls you. He said,
So, relating to this, the next thing we're going to be talking about now, and there'll be another clip where the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is talking more about this, is the 4 functions of the mind. So here we have a slide to actually talk about manas, chitta, ahankara, and buddhi. buddhi. But just to give a brief overview, the manas is basically, yeah, it says here, the sensory gatekeeper. The nature is doubt. It's, should I pay attention to this? Is this important? Basically, the constant oscillation. It's whatever the modern world call it as mind is the first layer, is basically what we call as manas. The next layer is chitta. Chitta is it's the emotional memory, the memory warehouse. It's whatever information gets taken in by the senses, it gets filtered through the chitta, where our biases, our preference, our likes or dislikes, our memories, everything, the information gets filtered through there, and our experience starts to have a certain emotional impact for us, emotional kind of memory, emotional kind of, we're able to perceive it in a certain way according to the individual. And then ahankara is we call it basically the inner image, how we see ourselves. It's the eye maker. It's almost like, if you think about it in a certain way, thoughts are kind of like dust that kind of pass through to and fro. The ahankara is something to which the dust starts to stick. So if the ahankara was not there, then there's nothing for the dust to stick to. But because there's something there, the dust starts to stick, and we start having these thoughts like, I'm not good enough, I'm not this, I'm this, I'm this, all these different things. Buddhi is the discriminating intellect, the basically CEO. It's the one that actually takes a step back from even the ahankara and says, okay, this is important, this is not important, we should do this, we shouldn't have to do that, things like this. And so the next clip, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, is going to be talking a little bit more about this. Yep.
You don't have enough time to do all the mistakes and learn. Anubhava is the path of subconscious.
Yeah.
Small diagram. I'll try to explain how we receive the information from the outer world, how the process goes on in our being. I use Sanskrit words. I'll try to give you the English explanation. For example, you are seeing something through the eye. You are seeing me. Let us take this example. The moment you see me, there is an energy called chakshu, which converts the information like a digital processing. If you want to process any information in the computer, you have to digitize it. It has to be converted. So the conversion happens by chakshu. Actually, chakshu only sees the whole thing. Chakshu means the energy which sees. The energy which sees. Chakshu takes the information to manas. The moment the information is received, chakshu is like a file. In that the information is put, and it takes to manas. Immediately manas is the place, we can say, the first step of our being. Manas completely analyzes, and it starts classifying. It will first say, the broad outline will be given, and he is a man, or he is a human being. A broad outline will be given. Then that file will go to Chitta. Chitta immediately starts analyzing. Have I seen somewhere? Have I seen him somewhere, here, there? You try to connect whatever you experienced with this color, or with me, or some other Swami like me. All these memories will come up. You try to connect. You try to connect yourself with the information which you have received. Till this time, till the information comes to Manas, it will be only analyzed in a general way. The moment it comes to Chitta, you will start. Chitta is the memory. All the memories which you have collected is stored only in Chitta. The Chitta, with all the old memories, past memories, you connect. You start analyzing the Swamis whom you have met. If they have done some good thing for you, immediately you start associating me also with a good thing. If you had some bad experiences, then you start associating me also with the same bad experiences. So whatever process, whatever you know, with that you connect. And the file goes to Buddhi. Now, Buddhi will decide whether to sit here or leave. The Buddhi will decide whether to sit here or leave. And if the process goes like this logically, you are safe. You are safe. But it does not go always logically. It does not go always logically. Even though Buddhi decides, the Buddhi is not the authority to give command. He decides and the file is moved to ego. To ego. This is the mysterious zone. Still now, medical field is not able to penetrate this zone. This zone is still in the hands of meditation and the masters. Still now, this zone is in the hands of the mystics and the spiritual masters. The Buddhi sends the file to ego, and ego decides. Ego decides. The decision again comes back. It is given to Chitta, to Manas, Chakshu. Then it starts. The body starts working the decision. You get the decision from ego. Then ego says, "All right, let us sit and see. Let us sit and watch." Then you sit. If the ego says, no, better let us leave, you simply walk. This is the way the information goes inside and comes out. First, your eyes sees the whatever you see, that is converted as a file, the form of a file on which through which they can do the process. That is done by Chakshu. Then next, it goes to Manas. The Manas gives a, you can say, view or an idea about what it is. Then the file goes to Chitta. Chitta is the memories which you collected. See, in Manas, you are no way associated. But in Chitta, your memories are associated. Manas gives only from the collection. Manas never says right or wrong or anything. It just gives our overall view. Here is a human being with this cloth, with the turban. Just the idea is given to you. Then the Chitta only starts analyzing. Oh, he is Swami. Already I have seen so many Swamis. These are my experiences. I think then what to do. Then that file goes to Buddhi. Buddhi only decides. But the problem is Buddhi doesn't have authority to give command. So the command can be given only by ego. For one shana, the whole file takes a quantum leap. From the ego, command comes. Your body executes that command. If all thing happens logically, see, I said now a small example of seeing me. Seeing me, you see, and then the information is digitized and is brought to Manas. Manas gives a broad view about he is a human being standing here. All these ideas are given. And then it is brought to Chitta. Chitta says, oh, I have seen so many Swamis. Better. Now let us go back and do our work. Then immediately your Buddhi decides. If the file goes to the Buddhi says, I have seen so many Swamis. Let us go. Then you decide to go. You leave. If this process happens, no problem. If it happens logically like this, no problem. Things go safe and your things go smooth. But sometimes till here, one type of logic works. For example, smoking. From the level of eyes, you receive the information. It comes to Chakshu, it comes to Manas, it comes to Chitta, it comes to Buddhi. The whole file, when it is processed, your Buddhi says, no, smoking is not good for health. I don't want. Already I had so many bad experiences about smoking. That is the end conclusion of the Buddhi. But suddenly, something happens when the file moves like this. When the file moves like this, and it takes a quantum leap, suddenly something happens, and you decide to smoke. Please understand. If things go logically, if your Buddhi's decisions are executed immediately, as it is, you are not in any difficulty. Things are really beautiful. You are safe. But many times, your Buddhi's decisions are not executed as it is. The process, your Buddhi decides, no, I will not smoke, I should not smoke. Suddenly, you see the urge and you go for smoking. When the file goes to ego and comes back, the decision is changed. You send the file to the top authority with proper note. Finally, the decision comes opposite. You can't do anything.
So yeah, like the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism says, it's the process itself is there, but suddenly when we get involved, that's where the mess starts. So just be a second here while I transition back over to the slides. Then we have one more video here, one more clip from the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, talking about bringing order to these functions of the mind.
May I start the session? I'm asking you. Because the program starts not when I start speaking. It starts when you start listening. Please listen. The first thing you need to know, listening. Authentic listening. Life starts when you start listening. As I said today morning in the satsang, Ganga may be there, Himalayas may be there next to us. If we are sleeping, what's the use? So all the principles I am embodied is like Himalayas. All the words I am uttering are like Ganga. But what is the use if you are not listening? So when you start listening, life starts.
So just be a second here while I fix the slides. Sorry, just one moment for a technical issue. All right. So, as the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism says, the program does not start when I start speaking. The program starts when you start listening. It's the same idea now with what we're talking about through today's session. Life doesn't start when the information in front of us wakes up. Life starts when we start giving attention to those things, when we start paying attention to those things. And so, this energy of intention really is where life starts. So, for example, hearing and listening, they're almost the same, but they're not the same. Same, but different. You can't listen without giving your attention. Well, you cannot experience reality without giving it your attention. You might be able to hear the things that the words that are coming out of my mouth. You might be able to see the scenes in front of you, but you won't be listening to what I'm saying. You won't be experiencing the life in front of you. The attention actually determines what's actually learned and absorbed. The attention actually determines what experience comes out of what's happening in front of you. And so, to avoid overthinking, so as the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism says, where the information goes through all the processes and then takes a jump into the ahankara, that's where suddenly the decision might get reversed. All the information says do one thing or don't do one thing, but the ahankara says no, I want to do it anyway. Then that's the thing that we want to pay attention to. Um, how to give the right training and the right neuroplasticity to that. And so this is where the concept of unclutching comes. To avoid overthinking, you want to pair listening with unclutching. And now we'll have a short clip about what is actually unclutching.
The brain is the organ which controls our whole physical being. Once our brain has been imbalanced, it will then transmit that imbalance throughout the whole body. Thought forms are pure energy that have the ability to influence people and everyday events in life. According to science, our brains generate an electromagnetic field which may be measured by such instruments as an encephalograph. This electromagnetic field is generated by the brain every time we think, and as our mind is never still, we may be compared to perpetual power generators. Fear produces nervous disorders. Anger produces headaches and violence. Confused thoughts produce congestion and ill health. Depression causes cancer, tumors, mental diseases, and lowering of the immune system, causing death through own willpower. Our thoughts generate intricate energy patterns which can be detected by sensitive equipment and seen by clairvoyant individuals. These energy patterns are known as thought forms. Surprisingly, thought forms are shaped by the thoughts themselves. Each of us creates hundreds of thought forms every hour and release them into the environment. Although we cannot see them, the thought forms have as real an existence as any other form of energy. Most people can sense others' thought forms, and a continuous energetic exchange happens between people about which we are usually unaware. This also explains why we sometimes take a sudden liking or dislike to a certain person directly on meeting them. We just catch their vibes. Unclutching is a guide for equanimity and enlightenment. Thoughts are like bubbles in a fish tank. Just as bubbles in a fish tank rise from the bottom, our thoughts also rise in the same manner. When one bubble comes and reaches the surface of the water, the next bubble starts and the third bubble starts. Because the bubbles are rising at high speed, they look like a continuous stream. But our mind is not a continuous stream. There is always a gap between two thoughts. Like the bubbles, we also experience a neutral space between two thoughts. This neutral space between two thoughts is our original state, the pure silence. It is a state of pure consciousness, the state of God. Since the gap or the neutral space between two thoughts is too small, we think all thoughts are connected and form a shaft. But there is always a gap between two thoughts. In the forest of northern India, the hunters trap the birds using a trap. They tie a rope between two trees. The rope is the shaft that we create by connecting two thoughts. In the middle of the rope, they secure a wooden stick. The stick is our mind. The rope is tied at the midpoint of the stick. When a bird comes and sits on the stick, the bird's own weight turns the whole stick upside down. It turns topsy-turvy. The moment it turns upside down and loses its sense of balance, it feels totally shaken and tightens its grip on the stick. It simply holds onto the stick as if its life depends on it. Similarly, we connect thoughts and form a shaft out of it and live in the fear that if we drop our mind, we might be lost. We might lose our identity. Because it is hanging upside down, it thinks, if I unclutch from this stick, I will fall and die. Is similar to the fear that if we start trusting that we are unconnected, unclutched, independent, and illogical thoughts, we might be lost. If the bird lets go and relaxes, it may flutter to balance for a moment or two. When it leaves the stick, maybe for a few seconds, it will fall, but then it will adjust itself and start flying. In the same way, we hold on to whatever we think is our identity and security, our education, our mind, our life, our relationships, or our bank balance. Ultimately comes to remove the stick that is our identity. Just like the bird, we don't realize that if we drop our mind, at that moment we can become a Paramahamsa. That very moment we can be liberated. In Mundaka Upanishad, there is a story which explains there is a huge tall tree, and in the tallest branch of the tree, there is a golden bird sitting unclutched from everything in bliss, like Dakshinamurti. In the lower level branch, there is a small bird which jumps from here and there to various branches eating fruits. When it eats a bitter fruit, it feels bad. Whenever she eats the bitter fruit, she sees the bird which is looking above silently like Dakshinamurti and feels why I should not be like that bird. But unfortunately, when the same bird, when it eats tasty fruit, it forgets the bird sitting above it. In the same way, she keeps battling between branches, eating bitter and tasty fruits again and again. One day, as a small bird flies up higher, and as it reaches near the golden bird, it realized that he and she are the same. There is no difference between them both and realizes her original state. The small bird realizes that she also can be in the same state of the golden bird and become a Paramahamsa. This moment, trust yourself. Don't bother about losing your identity. Just trust yourself and let go of your identity. You will immediately become a Paramahamsa and be liberated. All you need to do is to trust that you're unclutched. Dropping the conclusions you can't be transformed is unclutching.
So, what is unclutching? We heard a little bit about it now, but just to go a little bit more into it, it's the practice of observing thoughts without connecting them to a continuous chain. Always, for example, even this moment where there's one thought coming in after another through our own mind, and for whatever reason, we start to chain them together, thinking it's a continuous, basically stream of thought, a continuous thought process. But in actuality, every single thought we're having right now is individual. They're not actually connected to one another other than the connection we're making to it. So when you're unclutching, all the thoughts that are coming through you, they should be witnessed rather than basically clutched. Sorry, I see some messages here. Let me just open that up. There it is. Yes. And so when you're unclutching, all the thoughts that come by should be witnessed. You should be able to watch them pass by just like bubbles through a stream. Or even like clouds watching clouds pass by. Every single one of these thoughts are equal to another. There's not one thought that's bigger or smaller than the other. There's not one thought that's even connected to another. Each one of them are basically just passing by. And Basil, definitely I'll share the link with you to the video. I can share the link to these videos to you in this chat as well, and also I can reach out to you as well. And so listening and unclutching. Listening directs your attention to some direction, to something. Unclutching frees that attention. They're both used for different things. So, for example, if you're driving a car, you're going to be using different gears for different situations. When you're starting off first gear, let's say if you're going uphill, you need to go, or downhill, you're going to want to switch to certain gears. If you're on the highway, you need to go to a higher gear as well to make sure you're able to keep up with the speed and everything else. Unclutching is the point where you're able to actually switch between gears. You're literally free. You're not in any gear. You're not clutched to anything. You're completely free. So each one has a purpose. Listening has a purpose. Unclutching has a purpose. When you practice them together, what happens is you start to have a new sense of clarity starts to become born and strengthen in you. Your focus starts to become refined. Your mental noise, the brain fog, that starts to increase now too. And so we'll spend a few minutes here, just 2 minutes, actually practicing this. We'll practice unclutching. We'll practice sitting here, being able to now open the here again. Basically being able to observe the thoughts without connecting them to a continuous chain. We'll sit here and allow the thoughts to come and let them be witnessed, not having a thought about the thought, not connecting the thoughts, just letting the thoughts be there. So we'll spend the next 2 minutes or so going into that space of unclutching and actually going into that space of being free from thoughts. So know if the one thought is connected to another, we can simply unclutch. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. And so I do apologize. We had planned for the guest speaker to come and speak a little bit more from the neuroscience side of things, but unfortunately he wasn't able to come today. So we'll jump right into the Q&A. So if there's any questions that anybody has about anything that we had talked about today, definitely feel free to put it in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourselves as well, and we can definitely have quick Q&A here. And for the videos, yes, definitely we can share the links to the video as well, so that you can also go through them. And you know, the more you listen to it, the more it's the same thing with the neuroplasticity thing. The more you listen to certain things, the more you get reminded of certain powerful cognitions, the more deeper they become ingrained in you, and they become literally a part of you, like literally and neurologically, they become a part of you.
Thanks, Vinoshan. This was really good. Is there any? Can you hear me first of all?
Yes, I can.
Okay, okay. So, is there any way that this can be turned into some sort of a short program, like over a period of maybe 3 or 4 events? Because there's a lot of information here, but I think it can be more powerful if it's actually turned into a short course or a program of some sort to
Yeah.
actually have people participate at a deeper level.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
No, I completely understand. Yeah, I can definitely reach out to these guys and make sure that we have something planned and organized for that, because I agree, like session by session is definitely, as information is definitely useful, but being able to, again, coming back to neuroplasticity, like having a practice of it, whether it's a weekly program or like every 2 weeks or whatever it is, just having that practice it becomes a ground level impact too. So definitely we can put something together and make this whatever we learned today in this session, we can turn it into a program. Yeah, 100%.
Great, thanks.
So with that, that comes to the end of our session for today. Definitely look forward to hearing more updates. Yes, there's one more question in the chat. Can you please explain more specifically how you can practice unclutching most effectively every time you catch yourself getting distracted? There's one thing the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism says. He says, Smaranat Mukti, meaning the remembrance is liberation. Obviously, we're not always going to remember, oh, let me remember to unclutch, let me remember to, you know, whatever it is. But every time that you do remember, every time you do have the situation in front of you, and we're getting very intensely involved, or very or even if we have a lot of work in front of us and we start involving in the work before unclutching or anything like that, it really is coming down to the practice of every time you do remember that moment unclutch. If you don't remember, fine, no problem. But every time you do, you're building that neuroplasticity inside you to the point where you start to remember more often. It's not a question of really memory at that point. When the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism talks about smaranat mukti, it's not that it's not a memory thing. It literally is the neuroplasticity where it's these practicing unclutching anytime you do remember. So before you're going to do some work, before you're going to enter a meeting, before you leave the house, before you put on the shoes, as soon as you wake up, even spending just a few minutes of unclutching, every time that you remember unclutching, those few minutes, practice it. So practice unclutching. Practice literally, in my mind, maybe it's a little bit informal the way I describe it here, but it's almost like playing hot potato with your thoughts, where it's so hot that you just don't want to touch it. It's like, okay, fine, 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 fine. Okay, go next, 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 next. You're not really latching yourself to any of the thoughts. It really is the thoughts come and go, come and go, come and go. You see them kind of like, oh, okay, that looks nice. Okay, next, next, next. There's no association with any of the thoughts. It's almost like even in a way, it's like going into a museum and kind of seeing each art piece and saying, okay, this is nice, let's look at the next one. This is nice, let's go to the next one. This one is okay, let's go to the next one. It's always the unclutching itself, it really is just being a witness to your thoughts. There's nothing that's good or bad about what's going on inside. It's just we don't have to get too involved and attached to things that are naturally already happening. These thoughts, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism also says, which also made me understand it a little bit deeper as well. It's the thoughts are actually passing through you. Meaning, for example, if you're standing still, I'm standing still right now, there's thoughts literally in the air just passing through. So it's not like I'm consciously generating the thoughts or anything like that. The thoughts are passing through me, I see them, and then I make the decision of, oh, that's relevant to me, that's relevant to me, that's not relevant to me. This one's connected to something that's happening right now or something that happened before, and you start to have these thought processes that start to come out. So it's just a matter of realizing that the thoughts are passing through you. It's a question of, okay, am I going to associate with them? When you're unclutching, those are the few minutes where at least consciously you're saying, no, I'm just going to let them pass through me. I'm not going to attach myself to those thoughts because it's not relevant to me right now. I'm going to be free. So really, that's the two things. One is remembering that the thoughts are passing through you. They're not happening from you. They're passing through you. And then the other side of it is whenever you remember. So a few minutes after you wake up, when you're putting on your shoes, when you're in the shower, right before you work, maybe before a meeting, even if you're sitting down just before a meal, or even as you're eating as well, it's not like you have to stop everything that you're doing just to unclutch. Even while you're doing something, you can. That's another part of unclutching too, is unclutching as you're living. So that's the next level of it as well, because that's where really you enter into the flow state. So anytime you remember, you start to build that neuroplasticity in you. To answer your question, I would say basically these two things. Whenever you remember, that's the best time to do it because the more you do it, the more you'll remember. It becomes a virtuous cycle. And the other side of it is the actual act of unclutching. Just remember that the thoughts are passing through you. So whenever you do unclutch, everybody something different works for every person. For sometimes this idea of the thoughts passing through me sometimes works. Sometimes the idea of hot potato works. All those things, they're all different ways of saying the same thing. So definitely whatever works best for you, I would say work with that. And Swamiji has given hundreds of satsangs, if not thousands, on clutching too. So how many different ways that the Supreme Prophet of Hinduism has phrased it too? There's always something for us to catch on to, something for us to be able to understand as well. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, very good. Thank you.
No problem. And so with that, we'll go ahead and close with the Purna Mantra. And again, thank you everyone for joining, and a sincere thank you from Kailasa, Toronto. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sarvam Bhagavan Shri Nityananda Paramashivam Paduka Purnamastu. Om Nityanandam. Nityanandam, everyone. Thank you.